In the quiet corners of our world, where shadows linger longer than they should and silence grows thick like fog, something watches. And sometimes it waits. Welcome back to Dark Cresset, your home for terrifying tales, true horrors, and the unspeakable things lurking in places you'd least expect. Tonight, we're diving into the forgotten halls of an ancient university library in the remote town of Greyfield, Massachusetts, where two students discovered that some books aren't meant to be read. They're meant to be feared. It was the bitter cold of January 2011. Greyfield was buried beneath a relentless snowstorm. Streets were silent, blanketed in white, and the only sounds that echoed through the old college town were the howling winds that rattled the windows of Greyfield University, an institution older than the state itself, built in 1768. Inside the weathered stone walls of its main library, Greyfield Archives and Special Collections, two grad students, Monica Zhao, a Chinese-American history major, and Alistair Grant, a lanky, reclusive literature student from Scotland, were burning the midnight oil. Finals were approaching, and both had research papers due that could determine their academic fate. The library was enormous and maze-like, 4 floors of book stacks, archives, and private study rooms. But the basement was different. It wasn't just quieter, it was unnaturally silent, almost like the air held its breath. It housed the rare books, the ancient manuscripts, and an entire section that hadn't been updated since the 1950s. Yellowed wallpaper, dusty chandeliers, and shelves warped by time. That night, they were the only 2 souls in the entire library. Or so they thought. Monica had always loved the basement. "The silence helps me focus," she once said, but Alistair hated it. "It feels wrong," he muttered the first time they studied down there, "like someone's watching us from behind the stacks." On January 14th, at 10:43 p.m., the pair carried their notes, laptops, and thermoses of lukewarm coffee into the basement. The dim yellow lighting cast long shadows on the stone floor. A single portable heater buzzed softly in the corner, struggling against the chill. They set up in the old microfiche room. Monica dove into Latin texts on religious cults of the 17th century, while Alistair pored over folklore involving cursed books. Occasionally they whispered, shared theories, or chuckled nervously at how gothic the basement felt. Time passed. Then, at exactly 12:06 a.m., it started. It began as a soft sound, like someone flipping through a magazine. Alistair froze. Monica didn't notice at first, engrossed in her reading, but the sound grew louder. Page after page being turned, aggressively. Not just flipped, slammed one after another, fast and furious as if someone was enraged by what they were reading. "Do you hear that?" Alistair whispered. Monica looked up, puzzled. Then she heard it too. Flip-thwap. 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 It was coming from the eastern section of the basement, near the restricted access archives. They both stood. The heater had shut off and the silence was now alive with static tension. The sound of pages turning continued, but no footsteps, no voices, just that furious rustling. Alistair grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. Monica followed with a shaky hand clutching a small penlight. They walked slowly into the stacks. Shelves towered on either side, casting elongated shadows. Dust danced in the air. The noise was louder now, right ahead, but when they turned the corner, nothing. Just books. But as they passed a long-forgotten table in the middle of the aisle, both stopped cold. A book was lying open, its pages fluttering violently as if caught in a storm. Yet there was no draft. The heater was off. No windows, no air movement. Just this one book, frantically flipping pages on its own. Monica stepped forward. The second she reached out, slam. The book slammed shut with a deafening bang. The lights flickered. A whisper, so close it felt like someone exhaled directly into her ear, slithered through the silence. "Don't read it," she screamed. Alistair grabbed her wrist. "We're leaving," he said, eyes wide with something beyond fear, something primal. As they turned to flee, every light in the basement burst with a soft pop, plunging them into darkness. The page-flipping sound returned, but multiplied. Now it was all around them. Dozens, maybe hundreds of pages being torn through in every direction. The air thickened. Their breaths came out in visible puffs despite the closed space. Then, footsteps. Not theirs. Slow. Wet. Dragging. Coming from the corridor behind them. They didn't look back. They sprinted up the stairs 2 at a time, Monica dropping her notebook, Alistair nearly tripping over the old carpeting. When they finally slammed the door shut at the top of the stairwell, the sounds stopped. Instant silence, like someone had pressed pause on the world. They never returned to the basement, but Monica couldn't shake it. The book, the voice, the pages. So she started digging, and what she found chilled her to the marrow. Back in the 1800s, Greyfield University had been home to a secret literary society known as the Last Leaf. Members weren't just readers, they were ritualists. They believed that words, when spoken with intent, could bind spirits. They claimed to have sealed away entities using ancient tomes. The library's basement had been their sanctuary and their prison. In 1882, one of the founding members went mad. He locked himself in the basement for 9 days, writing a book called The Sleepless Reader. The book was never published. Rumor says the final page is written in blood, and that reading it aloud invites something that can't be sent back. Guess where the book is believed to be stored? That's right, the eastern section of the basement, right where the flipping came from. After hearing of Monica's experience, a campus security officer named Daryl quietly approached her. He said there were cameras in the basement, old, grainy, analog, but sometimes they picked up things. He showed her a VHS tape dated the night of her visit. At 12:06 a.m., she and Alistair walk into the stacks. They pass out of frame. For the next 10 minutes, the footage shows nothing, just static. Then, frame by frame, a shadow appears. Not walking, not floating, unfolding, like a silhouette rising from inside the shelves. No eyes, no face, just long, black limbs, reaching. The tape ends abruptly. Daryl never spoke of it again. 2 weeks later, he quit and moved to Arizona. Alistair never recovered. By March, he dropped out, claiming he couldn't sleep, that the sound of flipping pages followed him everywhere. One night, his roommate found him tearing every book in their dorm room to shreds, screaming, "It's in the words! It's in the words!" He was last seen muttering to himself in a Greyfield cafe, a red-stained journal clutched to his chest. So, the next time you find yourself alone in a library basement, pay close attention, not just to the books, but to the silence between the words. Something might be reading you back. If you enjoyed this tale of literary terror, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Dark Cresset. And remember, just because it's written doesn't mean it's safe to read aloud. Story number 2. The Stranger on Stonewell Lake. A true story. They say the sea holds secrets far older than time. But sometimes those secrets don't stay buried. Sometimes they drift, quietly, right up next to you in the dead of night. Welcome back, Dark Dwellers, to Dark Cresset, your shadowed guide through real horrors whispered under breath and remembered in nightmares. Tonight, we're venturing into cold, open waters where 2 friends sought peace, but instead found a watcher, a man who did not speak, did not blink, and may not have been a man at all. Autumn had just begun to whisper its arrival over the sleepy town of Delacrest, Michigan. The locals were packing up their lake cabins, wrapping boats, and saying goodbye to summer. But for 28-year-old Emery and her best friend Lyle, it was the perfect time to unwind. No tourists, no noise, just crisp air, rustling leaves, and the glassy stillness of Stonewell Lake. Emery had inherited a tiny fishing boat from her grandfather, a weather-worn aluminum beauty with the name June Calliope carved into the side. That weekend, the plan was simple: wine, fishing, and one last lazy evening under the stars before real life resumed. But they had no idea that someone, or something, else was also watching the lake, and had been for a very long time. As twilight dipped over the horizon, painting the sky in molten amber and bruised purples, Emery and Lyle loaded up the boat. They brought 2 rods, a cooler full of cider, a Bluetooth speaker, and enough mosquito spray to arm a small army. Stonewell Lake was nearly silent. No other boats. Not a single light from the cabins. The only sounds were the humming insects and the gentle lapping of water. They drifted out to the center, dropped anchor, and let the boat rock gently. For the first hour, it was perfect. Lyle played a chill playlist, Emery cast her line lazily, and they both laughed over old stories. But around 9:45 p.m., everything changed. The wind died suddenly. Not gradually, but instantly, like someone flipped a switch. The air felt thick, heavy. Even the insects stopped chirping. Lyle pointed toward the far side of the lake where a second boat had appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. It was a small wooden dinghy. No lights, no motor, just floating in the darkness. At first, they thought it was abandoned, but then they saw him, a man, standing completely still at the bow of the boat. Tall, motionless, backlit only by the ghost glow of a sickle moon. He wore a long coat, almost too long, like it was swallowing his frame. His head tilted ever so slightly as if listening. Emery raised her hand and waved, yelling, "Hey! You okay?" No response. No wave, no movement. Just silence. Lyle whispered, "I don't like this." Where did he come from? That boat wasn't there 10 minutes ago. They turned off their music. The man's boat remained still, too still for how softly the water moved that night. There wasn't even a ripple against the side of his dinghy. It was as if the lake itself avoided touching him. Then, he crouched. Not like someone checking something, but like a predator lowering itself into the tall grass. And then, he disappeared beneath the rim of his boat. Gone. Emery turned on the spotlight from their cabin kit and flashed it toward the boat, but the man was nowhere in sight. The boat was still there, but he wasn't. Lyle grabbed the oar. "We're leaving. Now." But the worst was yet to come. They reeled in the anchor as fast as they could. Emery turned the ignition, and nothing. Just a sputter. Dead. The motor had been running fine all day. Full battery, full tank. Now, in the middle of this pitch-black lake, it was suddenly dead. That's when they heard it. Thump. The unmistakable sound of something heavy landing softly onto the back of their boat. Both froze. Then came another sound. Not footsteps, but a kind of dragging, like wet clothes across metal. Emery spun around with her flashlight. Nothing. But the rear tarp was slightly lifted. Not by the wind. It was rising. Slowly. Deliberately. Lyle screamed, grabbing the emergency flare from under the bench and firing it. And for half a second, in that red, burning light, they saw him. Not a man. His skin was pale gray, waterlogged. His eyes had no whites, just bulbous black orbs. His mouth was stitched shut. The moment the flare ignited, the figure shrieked, not through his mouth, but as a bone-chilling screech inside their heads, like metal grinding inside the skull. The engine roared to life. Emery didn't ask questions. She hit the throttle and the boat surged toward shore, leaving the figure behind in the red glowing mist. They didn't stop. Not when they reached the dock, not when they hit the cabin porch. They drove straight back to town, barefoot, dripping, silent. When they returned the next morning with local police, the boat was there, pristine, untouched, except for a single wet handprint on the rear tarp, and long black threads caught on the bench seat, like the kind used to sew skin. After some digging, Emery discovered something that chilled her blood. Stonewell Lake used to be home to a remote mental asylum in the 1930s. One of the residents, a mute fisherman named Calder Wynn, escaped during a transfer and was presumed drowned in the lake. Divers never found the body, but some say they've seen a silent man drifting in a small boat. Always watching, always waiting. Locals call him the Hollow Sailor. If you see him once, they say, you're marked. If he boards your boat, you never fish again. Emery and Lyle, they sold the boat the very next day. Emery never stepped into a lake again. And Lyle, well, he won't speak about that night anymore, but every October, when the fog settles thick over Stonewell, someone always reports a lone boat with a standing figure just beyond the mist, watching, waiting. So if you ever find yourself alone on a still lake and the wind goes quiet, look twice. Because the silence might not be peace. It might be watching you. If this story sent a chill down your spine, hit that like button, subscribe to Dark Cresset, and tap the bell so you never miss another true horror. Got your own eerie encounter? Drop it in the comments, and maybe your tale will be featured next. Until then, keep your lights low and your mind open. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share.